Let's return to our top story. Keir Starmer has become the new British Prime Minister after being appointed by the King. He inherits a complicated foreign policy picture. The newly elected leader has promised to reset the UK's relationship with the European Union, but ruled out rejoining the bloc. Now, over in Asia, analysts expect the UK's policy on China to remain pretty much the same, as Labour and the Conservatives have similar views on this subject. David Lammy, who was Shadow Foreign Secretary in the opposition, has already said that he expects to engage more with Beijing. Now, we can discuss this further with Steve Tsang, Director of the SOAS China Institute at University of London. Professor Tsang, welcome to the program. First of all, Mr. Starmer's initial focus, we know that it is expected to be on domestic affairs. But what are the top priorities for his government in foreign policies and security?
In terms of foreign policy and security policy, I think the first priority is to re-engage with the European Union to sort out some of the problems since Brexit that have not been fully resolved. And then I think he would be looking at the British support for the war in Ukraine, how the UK can support Ukraine more effectively and at a better and for better results. Relationship with China will be really a bit further down on the agenda list.
We were on these relations between the UK and China. You've said in a recent article that it takes two to tango to form closer ties between the two. How is the new Labour government expected to navigate thorny issues with Beijing, like in the areas of human rights, spying or foreign espionage across Xinjiang and Hong Kong? What position do you see Mr. Starmer taking?
Well, the Labour Party and Keir Starmer in particular do take human rights seriously, certainly more seriously than the previous Tory government. So the focus on human rights will not make relationship with China any easier. But the real issue in terms of the UK-China relationship is a structural one. It is not a matter simply for the UK to decide how we can change and improve the relationship or otherwise. A lot of it really depends on what the Chinese government has been doing and will continue to do. The changes in relationship in the last 5 years was mostly because China has taken a much more hardline approach to the human rights issues in China, whether we're talking about Hong Kong or Xinjiang or elsewhere within China, and also the unleashing of wolf warrior diplomats. Those are the issues which make the relationship with the UK much more difficult. So a new government in the UK with the Labour Party in charge will still have to confront those issues, and therefore the review in China policy that the Labour government will conduct is unlikely to result in substantial changes to UK's China policy.
So you talked about the structural aspects of this relationship. It's been said that there was a lack of ministerial visits of any significance to China under the Conservative Party. So what would it take for Mr. Starmer's government to adopt a more consistent approach to Beijing?
Well, the Labour Party probably will be able to take a more consistent policy towards China because it doesn't have the big swing from the Cameron-Osborne administration of talking about a phony golden era in the relationship to the much more pragmatic approach, starting with Theresa May and followed on by several other prime ministers. And we have now, in a sense, turned into a new chapter. Labour will start off with the relationship of where we are with China, and they are not going to contemplate anything like a return to the phony golden era. It will be a pragmatic approach of trying to engage with China constructively and in terms of economic cooperation, but not ignoring the human rights dimensions and the issues involving people of Hong Kong.
So earlier you also talked about engaging the EU. Mr. Starmer has ruled out rejoining the bloc, but many are seeing this win as a reset of UK's foreign policy agenda and its relationship with especially with its relationship with its closest neighbour. How have the circumstances changed for the Starmer administration this time, and what are the challenges that lie ahead when it comes to improving Britain's relationship with Europe?
Well, improving relationship with Europe, again, will require the European Union to be able to move beyond Brexit and try to engage the UK in a very constructive way. Now, the good thing with the change of government is that the Labour government does not have the legacy of the Rishi Sunak administration, which has to bear the consequences of Boris Johnson administration dealing with the European Union in bad faith, which left a very bitter taste in Brussels. So Brussels can afford to turn a new page in how it engages with the UK, but the kind of economic cooperation and some of the restrictions in place are not going to be easy to resolve, but they would probably be more willing to talk than they were previously.
Meanwhile, there is another election to look at, the US elections that's coming up in November. Now, whoever wins this election, Biden or Trump, it will have significant impact, right, on Britain's special relationship with Washington. And against the backdrop of the wars in Gaza, in Ukraine, relations with China, I suppose addressing differences between the two countries won't be as straightforward, isn't it?
Well, the special relationship is more special from the perspective of London than from the perspective of Washington. And this is not new under Donald Trump's administration previously, or if there is going to be a second Trump administration. That has been the case all through the Cold War. And it simply reflects the changing balance of power between the United Kingdom and the United States. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, of whichever political persuasion, will have to work with the President of the United States, whoever he happens to be. So even if we are looking at a second Trump administration who has value systems that is not exactly the same as the Keir Starmer government in the UK, I would expect Keir Starmer to try to continue to work as much as he can with the United States, exercising some element of moderating effect if it's a Trump administration, but otherwise stand with the US in policies and areas where there are not a conflict of interest.
Professor Tsang, thank you very much for speaking with us. That was Steve Tsang, Director of the SOAS China Institute at University of London.